Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Research Notes podcast. I'm Dr. Primrose ZJBima, and in today's edition, we've got the beautiful, intelligent, ever so awesome, multitasking Simnikiwe Tuku. She is a published author, academic, and activist, predominantly focusing on gender studies, transformation, decolonization, and gender equality. She earned a Bachelor of Social Science degree from the University of Cape Town with distinction in gender studies and is currently pursuing an honors in gender and transformation at the University of Cape Town's Department of African Feminist Studies. Outside of academia, of course, because she wears many caps, Simnikiwe is a gender advisor and an agent of change educator with the Office of Inclusivity and Change. She has served on many UCT student leadership structures, and she's part of the Golden Key Honor Society. Currently, Simnikiwe is working towards launching a digital art space titled Chaotic Peace after her first book of the same name. Simnikiwe, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rose. That was a very long intro. Thank you so much. I was like, who are you
Hey,
talking about? Is that me?
it's all about you, girl. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to join you on the podcast.
Awesome. So let's get right to the questions, which I'm excited about, and I hope you are as well. Awesome. So could you please kindly share with us what is your field of study? Although I stated, your majors and your degrees, and how did you get to where you are today academically?
Okay. So my field of study is predominantly within the gender and transformation space. As so is my activist work. It's also in the gender and transformation space.
Mhm.
How I got into it was that in my undergrad, I had a very complicated process discovering my love for gender studies. So in my first year, I majored in psychology and information systems. Crazy.
Wow.
and and I was like, well, I really like social development. Maybe let me go into it. I dropped information systems, and then I was starting to do psychology and social development. But then towards the end of my degree, I was like, you know what? Let me just drop psych because psych was really like pulling me back, and I really wanted a more humanistic aspect to it, a more activist approach to the work that I wanted to do in the future. And with psychology, it was such a deep science for me, and I lost the passion behind psychology. So I really took up, gender studies. And along those years, I had taken gender studies as an elective. So when I changed it and it became a major for my final year, it was really easy. And I was very surprised on the graduation day when I was graduating in distinction. But I've always had a love for gender studies. I've always been curious in the lecture halls, always, just talking with the lecturers, asking them, all of that. So my love for gender studies really grew like through the years. And one of the things that was really, really, really different with gender studies outside of everything else was its real focus on people, its real focus on intersectionality, how it really dove into hard topics as well. And this happened in the classroom and outside as well. And how it really challenged me to really think about how I look at myself as an individual in society. And if you're doing, social development alongside and you're doing gender studies as well, um, because social development is more about policy making, structuring solutions to make a better society, it was such an intermingled kind of like a merger between the two subjects, that it just became so evident to me that in my honors year, let me just do gender studies and transformation because I wanted to actually know how to actually transform spaces in society with the knowledge that I've gained in my undergrad. And the honors degree in gender and transformation was just super, super perfect for me.
Oh, great. Well done. And congratulations for making it this far. And I think at the time of recording, Simniki was done with the coursework in the research project. So that's really amazing. I think I resonate with how you got to know about the gender studies major because it's not well marketed. Like you don't go to university thinking, I'm going to study gender studies, particularly in this part of the world. So I was doing international relations and public policy. And because I had a passion for women equality and gender, I just thought maybe I should do gender as an elective. And I picked it up as well as a major somewhere along the line. I also realized I had a distinction in the major, which is I think is really great. So that makes two of us. Now moving on to you again. So what are you currently focusing on as a researcher?
So my current focus within research is more so in the masculinity space. Because it's such an untapped environment, especially within gender studies, I my focus is more about gendering masculinity the way that we do for women and young girls. So looking at young boys and young men and having conversations with them, really looking and diving deep into the research field to understand the dynamics of masculinity as it exists within a South African context, and also contributing to that in terms of outside of academia, having really like real life conversations with men and with
Exactly.
individuals who are interacting with masculinity more proactively in their daily lives. And what's really important within the emergence and rather the change of masculinity has been such a hot topic recently in the past few years, especially on the internet. And I think one of the things that we as academics have to do is to also look at the trends and how the world is changing so that we can not only catch up, but also research what's also
Indeed.
going on. So, one of the things I really wanted to contribute, especially as a young woman, is to start having conversations with young men. And one of the things I'm really working on right now, or rather worked on in my honors, was understanding the perspectives of young men in university about what they think about call out culture and SGBV, sexual gender based violence, because it is such a hard topic that never gets attention when it comes to masculinity, because we never hear the voices, or rather it seems as though they have no opinions on the topic, but there's a lot to say and there's a lot to be learned as well. And it's a really interesting field. It's a well researched field at times
Hmm.
on certain topics, but it is very under researched when it comes to South African dynamics on that one. So I really wanted to contribute on that side. But in general, I really love. I'm a womanist, so I center the Black woman experience in every single research study I do, in every single talk that I do. I really like having conversations that break down, the systems that coloniality has left us with. I love decolonization. I believe in decolonial joy. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into research that seems very hard and that seems very closed off to women is to also break the boundaries that says that women can't research into spaces where it is unsafe for them to research, or it is very much so male dominated because there is nobody researching it. So yeah, that's currently what I'm focusing on. I've been loving it. I've been having really, really great conversations. And even outside of academia, in my activist work, I've worked with a lot of great young men and having really positive conversations around consent, around GBV, queerness, etc. And just having those conversations and just breaking it down and normalizing the existence of those conversations within South African masculinity as well.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I think what you're showing us here is that research is not all about thinking and writing, looking at literature that already exists, but you use the word conversations, right? It's a process that allows you to co-create knowledge and get meanings and understandings of like different phenomena, for example, within the South African context, and the inclusion of masculinities. I'm one of those feminists who tends to over focus on, women's voices, women's experiences, because of course that's what we're focusing on. And then forget that the power structures we're speaking about, the forms of violence, right? They come from particular gendered processes. And we do need to actually have more holistic approaches. So I really applaud you for that. Well done. And then in terms of I hate this word. I'm sorry to use it in this conversation, but the phrase a real world impact, would would you say your research has any? real world impact? And if so,
Yes,
how?
definitely. I think that all research has real world impact. How mine has it is that when I was starting this degree, I intentionally went to the Office of Inclusivity. Before even just going into the year, I applied to become a gender advisor and an agent of change educator because I felt as though the work that I was doing in my undergrad wasn't fully represented in the work that I was doing in real life. So the Office of Inclusivity and Change gave me a space where I could be an activist, I could be a gender advisor, I could be, a first responder trained by Rape Crisis SA, to not only just write about the work, but to actually live within the work. And the real world impact is definitely the co creation of knowledge. I think that as academics, we really need to center most of our modern conversations and our modern research on co creation of knowledge, especially, like you said, in the context of South Africa or even Africa in general.
Mm,
Because of the multifacetedness of different people, cultures, religions, and just social standings as well, economical standings. There's a lot to be understood about individuals in society, and then just box people in one way and don't let them in the academic process of co-creation. I think we definitely lose. So when it comes to real world impact, for me, it's taking the academic conversations that I have in class and that I write
mm,
about and taking them into the real world in spaces where, we will sit around a circle with different types of people from different types of genders, and you will have a conversation about decolonization in the university space. We'll have conversations about GBV and why GBV exists. Because what is the point of writing a paper, an academic paper, when it isn't
mm,
going to be read, when it isn't going to come into fruition as a conversation? And it's not going to come into fruition as something that needs people to rather think about it. Because one of the things that I feel like as researchers, and some of our biases as well, is coming into the field and wanting to change people's minds. That's
mm,
not our job. It's rather to start the conversation so that they can see a different perspective. And from seeing that perspective, then we find that people then make better decisions towards that. And that's how I believe that we can even achieve gender equality. It's having conversations and not forcing people to accept one way of looking at things, but rather presenting, the stats, presenting the conversations, questioning people and their beliefs as well, and not in a way that is territorial that says you are wrong, but rather saying
mm,
that this is how life is, this is how other people live. What do you think about it? And what I've seen as well is that when you, let's say, for example, in a space where you're speaking about GBV or rape, one of the things that I have seen as a gender advisor is that when I center everybody as a possible perpetrator and as a possible victim, the conversation is different when, if I come into this space and I already gender one specific gender as
mhm,
the perpetrator and one specific gender as the victim. And what I found also is that the phenomenon where everybody within the space is a possible victim and possible perpetrator, they can position themselves in real life instances being a victim and being a perpetrator. And from that, they can then make better decisions. They ask, I could say, better questions, for lack of a better word. And from that, it then inspires more curiosity. And what I always aim for, and what my team always aims for, is for those conversations to not only just be in a nuclear space where it's controlled and monitored, but rather also to be outside of that space as well. And it's in the general conversations where people are eating gutters on campus, but they're talking about GBV, and they're talking about being victims, and they're talking about being perpetrators, regardless of gender. And they're also talking about change as well, how to change that. Because that's how you break down culture, toxic culture. That's how you break down all of these systems that have been created and normalized um,
mm.
by the little mundane things and normalizing hard topics in normal conversations. So I think that for me is the real world impact of the work that I do. And it really makes me sleep better at night knowing that if I can have one hard conversation with one person who seems
Mm.
very stubborn at first, and I ask them questions and I reflect on myself, and then they get to reflect, and we co-create this knowledge together because I learn from people as well. Because I can never position as someone that is all knowing as a researcher.
Definitely.
Um, the fruits from that is that a lot of the people come from that having a different view of what academia looks like, a different view of what activism looks like, because we only look at activism as a protest and never a conversation.
Mm.
Um, and from the real change really starts. And yeah, I just love seeing it happen, and I love seeing the stories come back from that, and people just telling me how much of an impact myself and my team have done that in the space, regardless if I'm in academia or in an activist space with the OIC.
Resonate with the idea that real world impact or even change, it's about one conversation at a time, one question at a time, and going to different spaces or different people, because when we say real world impact, we like make this thing seem like an insurmountable mountain, when in fact, it's the steps that you make that count. So I really like that about your approach. And when we speak about research and conversations around gender, particularly gender based violence, and this fight against the system we call coloniality, it all seems like it's a lot of work. But you use the term decolonial joy in this conversation. And I think
Mhm.
you've used it before as well. Can you explain to us, like, what is it and what does it mean to you as a multifaceted person?
Decolonial joy, I think, is a concept and an experience that I am very grateful of having found from a colleague of mine. Actually, we were in a seminar, and they were like, today I'm feeling like sharing my decolonial joy, and my decolonial joy is being able to exist as a Black man,
Mm.
to exist as a person in a space where I'm safe. I think because of the complexities of coloniality and how coloniality is generational, and how coloniality exists with its different intricacies in so many
Yeah.
systems. One of the things that we tend to focus on is always, finding the solution. And we never bask into the freedoms that we've already achieved.
Indeed.
So for me, the colonial joy is finding joy in the freedoms that are already existing, even in the fight. It is existing in privilege as well, because not everybody can exist fully within privilege. And when I exist in my decolonial joy, I also know that I exist within a lot of privilege to enjoy that decolonial joy.
Indeed. Yes.
So, for instance, the biggest decolonial joy for me this year would definitely be becoming an author and contributing to the literature within South Africa as a poet.
Mm-hmm.
The writing process was a decolonial joy because it was very healing as well. And then accepting that I can be someone who is in that space and can have a voice to publish and to have my work out there. It was a decolonial joyful experience. And you could see that my decolonial joy also brought joy others, where you'd find people who would ask questions, how did you do it? And how can I do it? And I would gladly tell them the process. What inspired you to write a poem on grief, on environment, or on love? Because we center a lot of pain in our work. When you're in the humanities and
Mm.
you're reading a lot about, the apartheid system, slavery, and you going into the TRC and the coloniality, there's a lot of pain entrenched in our histories and entrenched in the systems that still exist and oppress a lot of people today.
Definitely.
So, yes, it isn't a form of escapism, but it's also being grateful of I, as a Black woman from the Eastern Cape, can still enjoy being an author. I can still enjoy going to a park and existing as myself and being safe for a minute or 30 or an hour. I can enjoy a space with friends, whereas my grandmother couldn't be in university. She never even enjoyed a space with other intellectual women, and they could sit down and have discourse and talk about the economics of things. And that for me is the colonial joy, is finding the little privileges that 2 generations ago, and sometimes some people 1 generation ago, did not exist. And it's being grateful for what we have also won and what our ancestors have also won, even in the process of still fighting the systems and the oppressions that still exist in the present day, because they still exist, and there's a lot of people who are still oppressed by the economics of things. There's wars happening around the world, there's genocides happening around the world, and there's still poverty, there's still GBV, there's still a lot of pain entrenched into the systems that were introduced by so much that is coloniality. However, part of the decolonial process is accepting your being as a person and being grateful for what you can also enjoy. Because our ancestors and the people before us, I would say, didn't have the same experiences that we're having as young women. And I always go back to my grandmothers. They couldn't have this experience of being, in a top university on the continent, and being able to pursue 2 degrees and having a part-time job and being able to write a book. Their main focus was that after finishing primary school, if they were even being able to finish primary school, was that by the time that they turned 16, they become maids, in a very white household and taking care of 1 children. And that was the circumstance of their generation. That was the circumstance of the woman that they had to become because of the constraining systems of that time. And one of the things that I always look back, and the things that I always try and emote to, is enjoying the spaces and the privileges that I have on behalf of them, because they couldn't enjoy the freedoms that I have today. So yeah, and there's a lovely song by an artist where she shares about how she always thinks about the hopes and the dreams that her ancestors once had, but never had the opportunity to really live them out. And I think that song really, really resonates with me whenever I feel like I abuse my privilege in ways where I'm not grateful for where I am. But yeah, that's what decolonial joy would be. It's remembering the freedoms that we have and enjoying them. Because it's not just a matter of just knowing it and being in the privilege, but the freedom that is there and the joy that is there. You have to enjoy it and bask in it however you can.
Oh, wow, so amazing. Me trying to summarize this, I feel like I'll do an injustice. I like the concept of queer joy, and I think it's something I would really want to like infuse into my daily living, because I think it's good to be intentional,
Mhm.
remembering those who were before us, reflecting, and also the aspect of joy, because life can become all about fighting, because of course there are battles, right? And taking on the struggle, a luta continua, and all of that. I
Mhm.
really like your perspective and how you're taking this on. So you also spoke about you being a writer and having a poetry book, which I'm excited about, and I do have a copy. I'll ask you maybe towards the end to share with us how other people can get access to a copy. I really found it really important, and I hope you allow me to do this. Like, I took about 5 quotes and I was like, I think I want to share these during the interview, you know. So the book is in about, I think, 4 parts. There's the summer, the autumn, the winter, and the spring. I still don't know the difference between autumn and spring. I know summer
Yes.
and winter in my life. I think being the person that I am, I don't want to say black, but yeah, the black woman that I am, I really liked much of your text, because it's very light, and it's you speaking to you somehow, but it's also like the conversations that some of us have with ourselves daily. So I'm just gonna go right into it. There's one on tenacity and hope, and the line that I took away from it says, "Start over." Today I'll start over. This time I'll get it right. And the second one was, I didn't sign up for this. Is this supposed to be this hard? Living day in, day out? Which I think a lot of people resonate with, regardless of their age and time.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one, which I think you'll also chuckle about, is procrastination manifesting. Literally, this short line which says, "Me to me, do better." I think we're gonna need a laughing break. And then I think a fourth one, which I think is important, something that also happens to me, and also it's good for people to know that even though you're this all-star person, it doesn't mean you're always high and fired up by optimism and strength. It comes from the poem retitled "It's Okay," and the sentence is, "There comes a time when you just don't know who you are, what you're doing, or where your purpose lies. That place is okay."
Yeah.
Hey, deep stuff. And the last one, number 5, I find coming from a home where there's so much support really helpful. And although, of course, I'm not going to cite the whole poem that you wrote, I think to your dad and your mom, it's Tata and Mama. It's really important because all the insecurities and social violence I've experienced, I've come to realize that I got so much awareness of who I am and comfort and love from back home. And that has helped me to sustain myself. So, my special line from that poem is, "You've given me all that I need: courage, patience, faith, and so much love." Ah, lovely.
Make me tear up.
So now, building up on Chaotic Peace, the poetry book, I am going to ask Simnikiwe to please tell us about Chaotic Peace Art Space. What is it and what inspired it?
So the Chaotic Peace Art Space is a digital platform where I can practice more decolonial joy. If I'm being very honest, there's elements where I will explore blogging, I will explore podcasting on different aspects. So the concept that I really want to apply is, taking one poem from my book Chaotic Peace and then making a whole podcast out of it. And from then also kind of like breaking down the poem and also going into, real life experiences, lessons that I've learned in my young age, and also going into facts as well, statistical facts as well from academia, because I would be doing an injustice to me having a degree in gender studies if I don't quote people like Hillary Crenshaw on my podcast, and talk about the complexity of what intersectionality is. So I think even just the book, one of the things that that you noted was the difference of seasons. So I don't think I actually explained it in the book. Is that every poem is a different day, and the seasons, when you really just go into other poetry books, no shade, is that the themes of the seasons also reflect the stereotypical ways in which seasons are looked at. So summer is very bright, winter is very cold, spring is very hopeful, and autumn is a transitional change. What I wanted to do is to show the realness of life and its unpredictabilities, where you are like, okay, I'm going into summer, and yeah, we're falling in love in the first page, we're losing best friends. Why are we talking about the planet dying? Because every poem is a different day. And I wrote this poem when I was 20. So I was in the midst of COVID. And I wrote maybe 2 or 3 poems a day. And it was a different thought, different feeling every single day. And I also wanted the reader not to have an unrealistic view on what life looks like per season. On some days, even in spring, you will have a deep depression, probably. You will be going through grief when yesterday you were falling in love and you were very happy. and you will think about, the molecules of water and how rain is so beautiful. And then the next day, so I think one of the things that I really wanted to convey in Chaotic Peace is the chaos in the peace of living, basically. Because living is such a consistent, chaotic thing because of how unpredictable it is. I even tell the Lord in the book, and I'm like, I didn't sign up for this. Why is it like you must give me a manual? Give me
Yes.
something, for me to work off, and sometimes I'll go into a deep prayer because that's how I am. Sometimes if I feel happy, I'll go into a prayer. If I feel sad, I'll go into a prayer. If I feel grateful, I'll go into a prayer. That's why it was also important for me to also portray my faith as well, because part of my positionality as a woman is also firstly being a Christian Black woman,
Mm.
and my faith is surrounded by that, and it's reflected also in the poetry. So within the space as well, within the art space, is I really want to explore how much I can take my decolonial joy in different art spaces. I have never explored photography, but it's always been something that I've always wanted to do. And I want that space to be a space where I can share my photography. And hopefully I can even get collaborators, other young people like me, or other older people as well, to contribute art pieces, to contribute poetry, to contribute blogs, you know,
Yes.
um, even if they want to have their own reflections of poems, is like we could even have a segment where people, they can read the poem and then they can share their experiences and they share their interpretations as well. Because I'm all about community. And what you will see in the book as well, and as much as it's very centered on my experiences and my worldview and also how I look at the world, I rely heavily on the people around me. I rely heavily, firstly, on God, and then it's my
Mm.
parents and my chosen family as well, which is my friends, my partners, etc. And those people matter. There's a lot of community within my thought process. So the art space will be a reflection of that as well. It's not just me talking to me and reflecting about me. It's me
Mm.
reflecting about the poetry I wrote and also how it interacts within the world and how it's reflective of the world at times, how it can help somebody else. I think what I haven't found, and it's maybe because I'm not really well read in a lot of poetry, the freedom to write about hard stuff, the freedom to be silly as well.
Mm.
I think there's always this perfectionism when people are writing, especially when you are a Black woman that's the first to do something in the family.
Mm.
It has to be a perfect poem. It has to be very serious. It has to be straight to the point because you're competing, with you know uh, people from the 80s who wrote Shakespeare, or whatever. But I was
Listen.
like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. Part of my freedom is exploring the English language in the way that I want to write it. Sometimes I don't use full stops in most of my poetry. It's just free flow. You will find a full stop in
Mm.
the last, you know. Um, and that's also me decolonizing the language that is English. You know, I think I'm not sure if it's in this book where I speak about isiXhosa as well as a language, where I've
Mm.
been privileged to know how to fluently speak English, but knowing the language that is the English language is also taken away from me fully immersing myself in writing in isiXhosa because my parents took me to an Afrikaans school and
Mm.
I did Afrikaans and English and I was fully immersed in it. And I love English. I used to win, English awards in high school as well. And I love English, and I hated the expectation that I had to be perfect in either Xhosa or English.
Mm.
And you will find in some of the poems, I'll throw a little bit of a Xhosa word here and there because it's also part of my decolonial process. Sometimes I interject with isiXhosa sometimes in my conversations in real life. So chaotic peace is like the art space and the book is representative of real life. It's not a fairy tale. It's not
Mm.
a it's not supposed to give you a false sense of hope, but to give you a realistic sense of hope. A hope where it's tangible, it relates deeply. I really wanted the reader to relate to the experiences. There is no person in university or even just in life in general that has not dealt with procrastination, especially
Definitely.
in this digital industrial world. But if you're going to write a poem about procrastination, what are you going to say? Because procrastination is so silly, it's so, why aren't you being in this hustle minded kind of like a society? But I gave myself the freedom, I gave myself the agency to be okay with writing poems that could be serious, that could tackle very difficult issues to speak about, but to also reflect me and my personality and my nightmares as well, because some of the poems are not something like things that happen to me in real life, but like things that are, am I next? What happens, if the next day I'm a victim, or I'm in a position of being a victim, or a friend of mine could be a victim, and those are South African realities. As a Black woman, I have to represent those as fully as I can.
Definitely.
But it doesn't mean that I won't be silly or creative or flowery and imagine stuff and look at the environment and imagine the earth dying, all of those things, because as a Black woman, I'm trying to also decolonize what our thinking is, because I feel like we've been positioned from a place where we only portray pain within our poetry, but never just existing and being.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted in this poetry, is for people to know that I just exist and I am a human, and I'm happy, I'm sad, I think about things, and I look at the rain. And that's what the art space is all about. It's just existing and taking up the space and claiming it as my own in the way that I want, without it being regulated or it being signed off as, okay, this has to be perfect. You have to get the script right. You have to, don't laugh at this because it's a very serious thing. Because that's because that's not life. That's honestly not life, and that's not genuine. So yeah, I try to be as authentic as possible, and to also be very, I had to really, really talk to myself, because I wrote this when I was 20. It was 3 years ago. There's some stuff that I'll probably, change within the poems, but I wanted to be as authentic to 20-year-old Sim and her mind and what she was going through, and to publish the poetry that she had written then, and I didn't do justice. So I wanted to pay homage to my 20-year-old self as well, and to be okay. But the space is for me now, as a little bit older, younger woman, and to also explore the complexities of being a young woman and being an author and being in this space as well. I hope that clarifies it.
It definitely does. And I think many people that will listen to this or watch this will really be inspired, and it gives them the opportunity to be mindful. We do live in a time where we flaunt the word authenticity, but when it comes to how we operate, it's usually on the extremes, wallowing about the sadness of things, the gloomy stuff, the negative things that are happening around us, or the other extreme where you are hyper optimistic, but you bring up this concept of realistic joy. And I do think that's one of the highlights from me reading it that I really found helpful and resonated with. I'm surprised that you wrote this at 20, because I don't think at 20 I was like that mindful. I mean, I probably thought about life, but I had not yet actually realized that one needed to adopt realistic joy. I think I was hyper optimistic and I didn't see a lot of things coming at me. I probably didn't conceptualize procrastination, but it was there. And I probably was shooting myself down for not doing things, for waking up and realizing time is gone and haven't submitted something. It's crazy. Anyway, I think it's really important. So do give us a link to the space. I really look forward to it. And you also brought up the aspect of having something that is intergenerational. I've been in so many spaces these days where we speak about how, in as much as a young Black woman, I speak a lot about ageism. I forget about how sometimes I even sideline the fact that I've got a grandmother, or that there's like older women. What are they experiencing? What are their experiences, and what are their voices saying? I sometimes forget about the younger people, people my age are shunning people born in the 2000s. So if you're all about the isms, you have to be inclusive yourself. So really, I look forward to the multifaceted approach that you're going to be taking. Now, this is a major question that a lot of people ask, and I don't think there's an answer, But when someone does a lot, we want to know how, because we also want to,
Do
survive
it.
and not collapse while working. So you're not only an intellectual, you write poetry, and you've done a lot of work, activist work, and you are into project management, because to get things done in like spaces like a university and working with the Office on Inclusivity, that is a lot of admin in addition to just doing what you love. It's a lot of interacting with people. I get people out myself. So I don't know. Do you have anything that you can kindly share with the audience about how you do it all so excellently, if I may say?
Okay, so I always tell people two things. So there is one book that I read, I think it was in 2022, the beginning of 2022. Is when I started just having healthier habits of productivity because when you're in university for a long time, it's trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, and you can't do trial and error all the time, or else you will fail. You have to find a system that really will work.
Indeed.
So I gave up on my systems and I found a book called How to Be a Straight A Student. And this book was written by Cal Newport. And in the book, Cal Newport really goes into something called time blocking, where you basically take your diary as it is, right? And you write from the time you woke up. And it's not going to be 8 o'clock. It might be 10 o'clock. It might be 4. It might be 6 o'clock because we're different. Some people are morning people, some people are not. But you lay down your priorities for the day and the things that you have to do so that you can realistically see all of the free time that you have and you slot in all of the other things that you want to do. So having this mindset that everything is going to balance perfectly, that's something that, Cal Newport really emphasized, that things are going to happen and you have to prepare for them. And you don't have to finish everything in one day. There's also be hopeful that tomorrow will present an opportunity for you to finish what you didn't finish in that day. And also be very mindful of what you did finish and what you did live up to. And the second concept that my best friend and I really we sat down one day and we were like, we're such bare minimum queens. But the concept that I like naming is called show up as your best bare minimum. Now, I don't want your orders to cancel me. I think that, a lot of people really mask bare minimum as the least effort, because I guess that's like the dictionary, the dictionary definition of it. But when I attach best bare minimum, it's like, if we're looking at the degrees of comparison, it's good, better, best. So I'm going to do the best that I can in the best amount of time that I have. But it's also eliminating the perfectionism of me, doing something to my fullest capacity, because that's where burnout comes through. I think that whenever I go into a day, especially let's say, for example, exercising, this year I went into a weight loss challenge for myself and I treated myself and my body as a science. And going into it, it was difficult. It was hard, but I can very, very proudly say that I've lost like 27 kgs this year. It was a discipline that I had to really focus on. It was a consistent prayer as well, and the inclusion of God into my day every single day. But there were also moments where I was like, nah, I don't want to do that though. But what the concept of best bare minimum is, you will do your best to show up, even if you do it in the worst way possible. As long as you do it. Okay. Yes. Because it's better than not doing it at all. Definitely. So what I would find is, my first set would be very, very lazy. Like I would barely get the form right. I would be really grudgingly like, I should just go back to bed. But the minute the second set comes in and my playlist is really pumping, I'm doing the form correctly. I'm really wanting to push another set.
Nice.
I'm motivated because I didn't expect myself to be perfect in the first place. I did it while I
Mm.
was tired. I did it while I didn't want to do it. At the end of the day, I showed up and I did the bare minimum, which was to show up in the first place.
Exactly.
And then I incrementally I just changed my mindset and to say, you know what, the bare minimum is just to show up. It's to even get my exercise clothes on and to be in that space.
Okay.
So being kind to yourself during that process, and knowing that you are firstly human, and as women as well, we also have cycles within the month that
Oh yeah, of
get us
course.
down.
I call it my
Like,
sick week. Like, leave me
you
alone.
see, and it's like it's like we should get paid. But it's like a thing of, you can never think that you're gonna show up as your most perfect self every single day,
Mm.
because that's not how it looks like. That's not what life is. Life is gonna hit you with a lot of rocks, but you're gonna have
Mm.
to decide: are you gonna stay under those rocks, or are you then gonna try and be perfect and push all of those rocks at once, or
Indeed.
rather do the best bare minimum, which is to take one rock at a time, one rock off at a time, one rock off
Yes.
at a time. Then that one percentage, it's gonna add up, and you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it one day. It might not be in your timeline,
Of
but
course.
it will definitely come into fruition, and it's the same thing when people learn languages, the same thing when people do degrees, I've seen a lot of students as well, especially in the University of Cape Town, where perfectionism is an ingrained mindset,
Of
where
course.
I have to do this, I have to be perfect. And when they fail, or they get their first bad mark, it's like the
Mm.
end of the world, and I can never get up from this. And I think that idea of perfectionism is something that has definitely been. I've been at the end of that, and I
Mm-hmm.
told myself, just going into the my growing years, is to accept that for me to do what I have to do, I need to show up firstly, and then I'll see whatever happens, and I'll then become my best by achieving the bare minimum first, which is to show up, and then the
Of
best of
course.
me will then come. But it won't be perfect, but it will still be the best of me within that bare minimum. And then one more thing, it's definitely prayer and planning. So I do
Yes.
believe in the prayer aspect of having to sit down and having conversations with God on your plans and the plans that He has given you, and to also let the Lord decide that if this isn't my plan, let
Yeah.
it not work. Okay, even if I want it.
Definitely.
So, but I always have this faith that the Lord would never give me a dream or a plan that is impossible. So
Yes.
each year, at the beginning of the year, specifically, we say this year, I put down 5 things in different color codes, and I said, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna publish chaotic peace, we're gonna lose 30 kgs.
Hmm.
And then in that, I will enjoy the process of publishing. I will enjoy the process of losing the weight. But it wasn't saying we will do this every day. We will wake up, we will do our best. No,
Yes.
I took all of that burden of perfectionism and I gave it to God. And I was like, when I have you, Lord, in this process, I know that in the end, at the end of this year, we will get through it. And same thing for my academics as well. I
Hmm.
was like, the Lord, I want a great GPA. I want a 75 GPA, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I ended up with a 77.5
Yay!
GPA, which is
Congratulations.
crazy. And this year has just been a manifestation of just how good God is, and how if I lean on Him and I give Him my burdens and I just show up and I
Mm.
pray that He can just guide me through that, even as difficult as it is. Because showing up is not just being lazy, it's being disciplined.
Big
It's
time.
showing up.
Yes.
You have to show up for yourself and for your dreams, and you have to work hard.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like hard work is underrated, and so is smart work as well. It's so underrated. But when you're disciplined and you do the hard work incrementally within your bare minimum, within your limits, and recognizing that you are every now and then, it builds up to great success. And I think that's why this year for me has been such a success. For me, it's every day is a different day, and I choose my struggle and I choose what I'm going to show up in, and I do the bare minimum, which is to show up. And after that, that's just the start of the process. Everything else I leave it to God. And if I'm in a space, I will show up as my best self within my best bare minimum. And I really hope that that concept is it resonates with someone. I haven't put it down and coined the term and
Yes.
made it the best definition out there, but it's something that really just it takes me away from the perfectionism of getting everything done, because in the past I didn't do well. I just burn and crash.
Mm, mm. Oh, wow, I can imagine. Thank you so much for that sharing. And you say the best bare minimum, but I think when people hear bare minimum and discipline, they're like, how? But like what you're saying is for you to actually just show up, for you to look at your day and actually plan. It's very important. And I like that you shared about your experiences with prayer and trusting God. It's something I haven't gotten to personally, like for example, through my channel, because there are some things that I can't explain because to the world they'll be abstract, but I know
Yeah.
that God was in it, and it's not even
Mm,
because like I'm a superhuman. But like what you're saying, having it written down, looking at it and reminding yourself also to enjoy the process. You spoke about enjoying the publishing process. When many people think I need to get published, it's like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? It's already stress oriented from day one, and they expect the
mm,
joy to come from, oh, when the book comes out or something. So I think also the
mm,
actually just enjoying bits of each and every process, you know, the prayer, I pray about the smallest things, like, God, I can't do this all night. I am struggling. This thing is due, like as if I'm talking to a person who's here. And
mm,
somehow I think he does intervene, steps in, and I see things getting done. So I think it is really important, even when it's something that is like wild and out of your imagination.
oh
Um,
yeah.
Personally, for example, I've always wanted to do speaking engagements outside
Mm,
South Africa. I don't have the money. Even if I save this year, I can't go to Europe, wherever. But you get
mm,
invitations and then it's happening. But you envisioned it. So it's okay to have it and it doesn't happen, but it's also okay to have it and pray about it because it can actually happen for you.
mm.
Thank you so much for the conversation so far. Would you like to ask me anything?
Mm. I think my question, because we're already in the topic of faith, right?
Yes.
I think when you did gender studies as well, and do you ever think about exploring the processes of being,
Yes,
and because how we look into research, being as a process is so philosophical,
of
but it's
course.
never included in the physical realm of, because it's so abstract, like you said, and it's very spiritual.
Yes,
It seems so away, and yet in society it governs a lot of things. Like people are anchored by their faith, and yet I feel like as
God.
researchers we always like to ignore that part. And I think personally as well, in all of my papers in the past 2 years, I always try and position myself in this essay. This essay is written by a Christian Black woman, so that people know that I'm not just writing about
Yes,
something as just a Black woman, but I'm a Christian Black woman. And my views and my statements are also kind of like they're aligned by my values as well. So,
definitely.
have you ever been challenged with your faith in research? And do you think there is a space for new conversations in academia to speak about, religion, or rather, let me say, spirituality in general? Because I view my relationship with God as a relationship first, then it
Mm-hmm.
is a religion. And that helps me just destroy the perfectionism of me showing up as my best self, because the Lord
Indeed.
doesn't want to show up as my best self. He wants me as I am. So yeah, that I guess those are the two questions from me to you.
Awesome. So I think I'll just speak on this, also reflecting when I did come into university, which reflected how I was raised, right? When you went to school or when you went to church, because I'm a Christian, there was idea that you're not supposed to question, you're there to consume information. So I just thought whatever was being taught was right. And moving on to a course, for example, when I did take gender studies, we were told that this is a moment to unlearn. And what I did struggle with initially was that because in gender studies, you are speaking towards patriarchy and dismantling every evil thing it has done towards you, it's so easy to think of it as, anti whatever you've been raised to believe in and whatnot. And so it took a lot of inner work to say, okay, I'm an anti-patriarchal African feminist Christian woman. I believe so much in God, and my faith has taken me so far. And being grounded, in spirituality in terms of communicating with God through prayer, through worship, how do I maintain this identity and still say I'm doing gender and transformation? And I think for me, I had to be deliberate. Like you, for example, you position yourself. So initially, when I was writing, I thought if I write about how religion had spoiled me and not given me the real idea around transformation, I shifted, to say, okay, so this is how I understand how I've been raised within these traditions. This is where they've gone wrong. And these are the ways in which we can engage with scripture, or we can engage with people within the Christianity religion to promote transformation, right? For example, we never used to speak about gender-based violence the way we speak about it now, because religiously and culturally, women were like kids. The same way you're supposed to not spare the rod, you would be allowed, I don't know, to beat them up and all of that. So those are now conversations we're having in churches and denouncing them, right? We now have church spaces where there's queer inclusion, but it was never there. It's still not in the text. So I think it's very important also to, when you go back into spaces, let's say back home, to then engage in those spaces. You know the language of how to engage there and be tactful there, of course, because you can't just come in and use the language you use in your gender studies tutorial. And also, I think academic spaces, sometimes people are open to listening and hearing your perspectives from your cultural or religious experience, although it doesn't always work. So I've actively done that through writing and through my teaching, because I've had the opportunity to be a lecturer. So personally, I'm at peace with my spirituality, with being a Christian and still being Black. Although I still say I hate the reality that the Christianity I know is how it was packaged by the British to my people. I really wish I had some way of connecting in the traditional forms, which my grandparents lost. So I don't have the connection, right? But otherwise, I think that's how I cope. I hope it answers your question.
That's beautiful. I love that. I really, really love that because I think it's people who are like, I am a womanist, but most of my work I look at it from I research from an African feminist approach.
Yeah.
And within African feminism, even though we recognize the intersectionalities of the people within the country and their cultures and their traditions and their spiritualities, I feel like we
Mm.
always forget those aspects of culture, tradition, and spirituality. And we need to do a service, even in the co-creation of knowledge, by including
Mm.
those things because it's very important. You know, and I think that it would be very colonial of us to exclude that in research and to not position ourselves as people who have spiritual understandings and spiritual gifts and spiritual
Indeed.
ways of looking at the world because it would be inauthentic and it would be the academic role would just be stoic. It would be still colonial. We'll be
Definitely.
feeding into like this, like I said, the intricacies of the little things that still exist within, the systems that are within, today that are entrenched within colonialism. And I really, really loved one of my professors in my undergrad, Professor June. She really, really loved the emphasis of, spirituality and the concept of being and the concept of community.
Mm.
Um, and she always emphasized that your positionality matters and that there is space within academia for you to exist as yourself and to also engage with the discourse, engage with the arguments and the papers while not losing your sense of self as well.
Indeed.
And I feel like in spaces like no shade, the psychology department, I always had to really, really like be very scientific and clinical. And I think I understand it because that's how they do things. And it's the same with other
Mm,
sciences like engineering and the science faculties and stuff like that. It can be very clinical. But I guess when you are a human scientist and you are a social scientist, you have to understand the different parts of being part of a society and what governs a society. And
of course.
we can't always push aside that part that is spirituality and religion that governs a lot of people's decisions and decision makings and policies in money as well, in the economics of things. So yeah, I really, really think that that was just something that I really wanted us to speak about. I really wish I had one more question,
You can
but I don't
ask
know if
me
you're up for
if you've got one right now, unless if you have to think about it, then maybe not.
it. Okay, so
Yes.
I think, okay, so in your process, going from undergrad, postgrad, master's into PhD, and then you were done with PhD,
Yes.
and I was like, yes, it's done. um, was there any point where you felt caged and limited in your writing,
Mm,
and in your writing process, that it felt so un-African feminist and it felt so decolonial because you had to write in a certain academic way? Because I feel like that's one of the things that I'm engaging with like staying or leaving in academia is,
yeah.
do I have the true freedom of writing in the way that I want to write? And if I write in a standard that is set by so many governing systems, am I not feeding into colonialism and the way in which colonialism expects me to write about research? So that's my question for you.
Oh wow. So for the reminder, there's cage, there's limited, there's the standard, there's, colonial. I think it's a very important question and something that I have to be very honest about. I did have moments where, so for context, I did my PhD in politics and international relations, and I was focusing on what we call elite peacemaking processes, basically how senior political figures facilitate conflict resolution. And I looked at how um, former President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa mediated Zimbabwe's election crisis in 2008, 2009. I also looked into how South Africa responded to the series of like military coups in the kingdom of Lesotho. So already the focus on that elite peacemaking and the particular actors involved in it required me to in depth engage with politicians at that level, academics who've been writing since the 1980s, who are mostly, yes, they were African male, but they have a particular way of writing and framing peace and security issues. And I had to interview them. And I don't think there was anything feministy, anything women, peace, and security about how I engaged with them. We call interviews with such people key informant interviews, and so many times I felt like I was being a child being talked at, someone who was being taught about concepts. Apologies if any of my interviewees will watch this, but I mean they're experts in the field, right? So it made sense that they were talking to a student. So I felt disempowered throughout much of the processes. My supervisor was great in terms of the guidance that they provided me with. But one chapter that I struggled with, the main reason why I thought I would never get a PhD is theory, right? In international relations, it's peace and security. You are mainly focusing on what they call realism, that states or political actors act in their best interest or what's best for their country. And there is nothing feminist about responses to election crisis, still even today. So I struggled a lot. And I couldn't have a section where I could do like a proper reflection on where women and peace and security features within Southern Africa in our responses to election crises. Although I did refer to how they didn't pay attention to the violence surrounding the elections, they didn't pay attention to gender-based violence and whatnot. But really, when people are sitting at the peacemaking table and negotiating, all they are thinking about is the power sharing between the two key contenders and what have you. So I don't think that it reflected who I am, right? It reflected a lot of this is what the theory has said. This is what most people have said in their literature. This is what the participants had to say, right? You have to work on the data and interpret it using the theoretical concepts again. So really, I did one which didn't work for me. And I want to say this also when I did look for funding for topics that were gender inclusive, I did not get it. Literally, the concept note I submitted where I wanted to focus on elections and conflict resolution, I got the funding. So it was a painful process, but I needed to get the PhD. And so it was only afterwards, like right now, my postdoc is in gender and transformation. Only after that did I really now start doing the work I'd wished I'd done. If you look at the book chapters and the journal articles I've written, they have a gender perspective. Even if I'm looking at the African Union or if I'm looking at legal reforms in different countries. So that's my honest answer. It was not easy, but I don't
I
know. I
can
survived.
imagine.
Yeah.
And you survived. You really, really do survive. And I honestly applaud your journey. Like, it's one of a very few, if you look at the
Mm,
stats, of how many women have PhDs. So what you did was honestly, it was amazing. And
thank you.
the work that you're still doing intentionally, just the intentionality of what you're doing with gender and transformation is amazing. And I really want you to know that your voice matters and people are watching in this space as well. And, you know, the interviews, the podcasts, the YouTube videos, the ones I used to stalk you through, they really
Wow.
help. They really, really help.
Yeah,
And I think that you're also paving the way for future academics as well who want to pursue, you know, their masters, their PhDs, and probably
indeed.
become lecturers or private lecturers, you know, or even activists as well
Of
who have
course.
their doctorate. I think it's really good to have a safe space on the internet for academics, especially academics who are underrepresented within
Of
the
course.
PhD community. You know, and to break the stereotype that there isn't people who are in the space who have PhDs who happen to be young, who happen to be black, and who happen to be women, you know,
Yes,
because we are so underrepresented. So I think the space that you have here, the community that you're building, the community that you're building on LinkedIn as well, it's such a great environment to have because it is so needed. You know, Dr. Zamambo Mkhize, who really does a lot of research into women in STEM and STEMinism, when I was
yes.
reading her papers, it just shook me to my core how underrepresented we within university spaces, within how many women who have PhDs. And, you know, when you were speaking about funding, I hate the fact that the most
Mm,
important work that's needed to change society,
of
which could be
course.
implemented into policy making, is the most underfunded as well. And it's the least encouraged because we're all about building the economy, building the things, and yet we always forget that we are a continent that is still recovering from a lot of generational trauma as well.
Definitely.
And we need humanistic approaches on how we can then battle and heal the continent as a whole, and not just South Africa,
Yes.
you know, heal its economy. And the way in which you heal an economy, you heal the people as well. And if the people are, you know, if the people are healed, then, or rather in a process of healing and recognizing that they even have wounds and generational wounds as well,
Definitely.
uh, then you find a more fruitious, like in a more stabilized economy, a more backbone the economy, especially with the inclusion of, this traditional leaders from villages. I feel like that's just something that we in Africa we really lack. Having traditional leaders, chiefs, and queens from the village being part of
Yes.
parliament, being part of the decision making. And I think that we have a long way to go. But our research is definitely going to make waves, and yours is
Yes.
already making waves, and I'm so proud of you.
I hope
So
so.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering
Mm.
that question.
Yeah.
Truly, it
Thank
makes much.
thank you for the question as well. It really got me reflecting, and I hope it provides insights to many more. And like what you said, even despite the work on women in STEM, I came to UCT before Rhodes Must Fall. So I was in first year in 2012. Rhodes Must Fall only happened in 2015 when I was doing my honors.
Mm.
I can tell you that the first time I had a black female tutor, I was in third year. I was like, what? Can we tutor?
Okay.
You know? The same
Mm-hmm.
UCT, when I applied to tutor, I wasn't taken. I had to go to the course convener. She was a white woman. I was like, why didn't you take me? And the only leverage I had was I told her I had the highest mark in her course 2 years ago and I had to show her my transcript. But like, I didn't even have to do that because if a person with less marks and a different skill from me could have gotten the job, you know? So there are a lot of politics, really, and I'm glad that I got those moments of bravery. I don't even know from where. And me starting this platform, first of all, the YouTube was I wanted to see people to see someone like them, right? Because I could not see me in lecturers. I could not see me in people that were doing PhDs. And so now, even expanding to say beyond me, I want people to also see just more than me. For example, today we're seeing Simnikiwe because we are there in research, we are there in academia, we are pushing boundaries in activism and arts as well. So, really, I'm grateful. And I think your conversation really will touch many in different ways. So, thank you so much. I hope this is not the last of our interactions, at least in terms of podcasting. And I look forward to many more of your works.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I truly enjoyed the space. This was such a lovely time. I had such a joy, and I can't wait. I'll be looking at the comments, and I'll be interacting with the people
Yes,
as well.
please. I'll let you once the video is up, and definitely please do interact with people when they comment. That really helps as well, and it gives like a more humanistic, appeal to it, for people to engage with you, even though we didn't have this conversation live with them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I truly
Thank
appreciate
you. All the best with all the post honors goals.
it. Thank you. Will do. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.